Today, when most people think of a historical fort, their thoughts probably turn to soldiers garrisoned inside a wooden or stone stockade, protecting settlers from Indians. But in 1842, the troops of Fort Washita in Indian Territory were neither living in a stockade nor present to protect settlers. The history of Fort Washita can be understood by getting an insight of the soldiers who lived there. Of course, their story begins with the removal of Native Americans from the east to what is now the state of Oklahoma. The United States government had promised in treaties they would protect these eastern Indians from the tribes already in the area. Future President General Zachary Taylor chose the location for Fort Washita in an area occupied by the Choctaw and Chickasaw nations. While units of artillery, infantry, and cavalry were stationed at the fort during various times, Companies A and I, under the command of Captain G. A. H. Blake of the 2nd Dragoons, began construction of the first buildings at the fort in 1842. The United States Dragoon was a soldier who was mounted, but also knew how to fight on foot. In the 1840s, his typical field uniform would have consisted of a wheel cap, a dark blue short coat called a fatigue jacket, and sky blue trousers. His weapons generally consisted of a saber, carbine, and pistol. The dragoon's role would later be taken over by the cavalry. The life of a dragoon at Fort Washita would probably have been similar at other posts, such as Fort Scott, Kansas. The dragoon was usually up by dawn and at least twice a day had to care for his horse, with one of these times probably in the morning. The horse was important as it allowed the trooper to cover distances faster than a foot soldier, and without a horse, a trooper might as well be in the infantry. The dragoon had to not only feed and water his horse, but also clean the stall and groom them out for 20 minutes. Ruins of stables at the post are located west and down the hill from the main structures. These stables were probably used by the 1st Cavalry from the years 1858 to 1861. Before breakfast would have been sick call. The sick dragoon would have visited the first or old hospital located near what is today Highway 199. This 2-room log structure was only large enough to hold about 4 men, and even in 1845, the post assistant surgeon wrote,
I find it too small to accommodate more than half of the sick men at this season when the garrison is in a healthy condition. I have therefore been compelled to ask for an additional room to the present building as a temporary arrangement for the coming season.
It was not until 1857 that an 8-room hospital was built near the post cemetery. Soldiers who might have died from diseases or other causes would have been buried at this cemetery, but in the 1870s the bodies were removed to Fort Gibson to the National Cemetery located there. After sick call, the dragoon would have eaten breakfast and then taken part in fatigue duty. This work would have included chores such as chopping wood, cleaning, or working on construction of buildings. This last duty would have been important when various buildings were being built. Original quarters where the dragoons ate and slept were wooden and considered temporary. One of the original barracks was located on the north side of the parade ground and consisted of 2 rooms separated by a passageway. This barracks was later used as a schoolhouse and the adjutant's office, and the structure may have looked similar to the future home of Chickasaw and Choctaw Indian Agent and Confederate General Douglas H. Cooper. Some soldiers would have been assigned to guard duty. Located near the old hospital, the guardhouse would have been occupied by the officer of the day. This officer would keep watch on people going in and out of the fort. A few days each week, beginning about 10 a.m., the dragoon would have drilled. The types of drills would probably have depended on how long the soldier had been in the unit. A new recruit would have learned about the equipment and drilled on foot. It was not until later that he got to take part in the drills that probably brought the most excitement, those on horseback. The dragoon would have eaten lunch about midday. Soldiers used an 1840s brick oven to cook 180 loaves of bread at one time. Each soldier was allowed 18 ounces of bread a day as part of his dietary plan. After the meal, the dragoon would have either taken part in more drills or fatigue duty. Sunset meant the end of the day, and the flag would have been lowered in ceremony. Upon the sound of tattoo by bugler, the dragoon would have been in his quarters unless on duty. It was not until 1849 when the soldiers at the fort got to live in a more permanent barracks on the south side of the parade grounds. This barracks was reconstructed in the 1970s, but a fire on September 26, 2010 once again returned the barracks to its state before reconstruction. A second, all-stone barracks on the west side of the parade ground was built in 1856 and was later used as a home by the Colbert family. This second permanent structure burned in 1917 and was never reconstructed. Though the original buildings of Fort Washita are generally in ruins today, the remains of the fort are a visual link to the past. Understanding the soldiers, such as the dragoon who lived, sweated, and died there, is ultimately understanding the fort itself.